All right, so based on the last video performing better than anything I've ever put up, I decided it would be a good idea to kind of run back the analytics. And today we're going to be answering the question of how strong do you need to be a national champion? So in order to answer this question, I decided to ask 4 additional supporting questions, starting with how strong are national champions? From there, we're going to be talking about what class is the hardest to win based on the highest odds, what classes / divisions are the lowest to win, get a national title. And final question would be how strong do you need to be in order to make it to the podium, just to be on the top 3.
Thank you. Now watch this drive.
So in order to answer the first question of how strong are national champions, I decided to take a look at the Teen 3, Junior, and Open divisions for both male and female across every weight class that there was data available for on Open Powerlifting, and just kind of conduct our analysis from there. So when we're taking a look at both the average winning dots on the female and male side, the average winning dots for the female competitors a 473, whereas for the male it's a 488.98, so we're gonna call it a 489. Now if you watched the previous video, you're probably asking yourself, that's sub 500, we're talking about national champions, the idea of being elite also implies that you're capable of being a national champion, so what gives? And to answer that question, I have a pretty clear direction to point to, and that's inclusion of Teen 3s within this kind of sample. So when we decide to re-answer the question and remove teens from the averages, on the female side we're seeing an average of 496, and on the male side we're seeing an average of 513, which is definitely a bit more in line with the expectation of being elite, quote unquote, or a national champion, right? But at the same time, these are entirely subjective labels, so this is really more so just so you all know. When we're looking at the teen data exclusively, we're seeing everyone achieve a sub 500 dots, and that was USAPL Nationals last year. We're seeing a pretty good amount of movement towards Powerlifting America because top people want the chance to go to Worlds. They want to fight against the best people that they can, and that only makes sense. So I feel like if I decide to conduct the same sort of analysis a year from now with data from Raw Nationals 2025, we're probably going to see the numbers decline, even though the sport is growing in terms of talent and we've got more people just kind of coming out of the woodworks even stronger than ever. It's not looking too good on the USAPL side. But getting back to our kind of focus. So when it comes to answering our second question of what class is the hardest to win, on the women's side, it's pretty clear cut 60 kg across Teen 3, Junior, and Open. 60 kg is the highest odds across all of those age divisions. So if you're looking for competition and you're in 60, there you go. It's pretty straightforward. But when we look at the men's side of things, we get a bit more of a spread across 3 weight classes from 67.5 to 75 to 82.5. These are our top dots across each different division that I spoke of earlier. So Teen 3, we have 90 kg. Junior, we have 82.5. And Open, we have 75. Another thing to note, we can see that the winning highest dots across all of those age divisions increases when we're jumping in age division. So starting out at Teen 3, we're looking at a 488 highest achieved dots. Moving on to Junior, we're looking at a 534 highest achieved, and in the Open we're looking at a 560. So pretty significant jumps from division to division. And especially when we're looking at the Open, we can see that there's a pretty high concentration of men in the Open scoring in the 500 plus, even 510 plus range. Whereas when we're looking at the Junior, that's definitely less common. It still makes up just about half of the reported winners. But on the teen side, as previously mentioned, we're not seeing anyone touch a 500 dots. But once again, this is USAPL data, so could have been achieved in Powerlifting America, but this video we're not focused on that. Moving on to answering the question of what classes and divisions have the lowest winning dots. I've been harping on the teens for, having the lowest winning dots, but when we're looking at the absolute lowest across the board, we can see that it's pretty skewed towards either the heavier weight classes or the absolute lighter weight classes, which is pretty interesting when we consider that the typical dialogue around these formulas is that it typically favors a middle lightweight competitor, whereas if you're on the heavier side, you're just going to be dealing with a disadvantage in the eyes of the formula. So we can see on the male teen 3 side at 140 plus, there was a 334 dots achieved, whereas when we look at 56 within the same age division, 370.97. So we're jumping from end to end of that kind of weight class spectrum, but we do see more presence within the male across the board of the lower weight classes achieving a lower dots, where in the junior 60 kg 448.31 was the lowest winning male junior dots, and within the male open 52 kg put up a 444.89 dots. So this does kind of break up the idea that these formulas are all totally fixed for people who are at lighter weight. We're just not seeing that here. But then when we look at the women's side, it's definitely more common for the higher weight classes to have the lower dots. So the female teen 3, we're seeing a 330.74. Moving on to the junior 100 plus kg, we're seeing a 367.87. And then in the open at 44, we're seeing a 443.47. So here we have kind of a jump, 2 on the heavier end of the weight classes and 1 on the lighter. Now, when referencing the kind of overall question of how strong do you need to be in order to become a national champion, and looking at these kind of lowest dots performances that still achieved a first place, we can see that you can be a national champion with 330, 340 dots. And I don't quite remember the percentages off the top of my head, but I do recall that kind of started out just being focused on 400 plus dots. So this can kind of raise more of a question of what did the people who showed up to Raw Nationals 2024 truly represent in terms of the overall talent pool? And another question of what does that talent pool look like a year from now as Powerlifting America continues to grow? So in order to answer our fourth and final question of what's necessary in order to podium, I just created a scatter of both the male and female podium within the open to show the spread of our first, second, and third classes amongst all of the weight classes that competed. And I do feel it's important to note, especially in this case because you actually see it occurring, that dots isn't the end all be all during the competition. At the end of the day, we're competing for the highest total within a given weight class, so you do see some cases where our third place has a higher dots than our second place, especially in the higher weight classes the 140 plus or 100 plus. Kind of given the sentiment of a lot more of the really competitive people within the USAPL shifting over to Powerlifting America, I feel that if we revisited this a year from now, it's probably not going to be super growth oriented, and we might see some stagnation as far as numbers go, just because the people who are setting the numbers that we're talking about in this case might be moving to a different federation, and that leaves room for the people who may not have been up there at the top to kind of move up in terms of their ability to perform on meet day. Now, if we revisit this style of video for data with Raw Nationals 2025, I'm not really sure if we're going to be seeing, an increase given kind of the talk about a lot of people shifting over to Powerlifting America, or at least a lot of the kind of top talent from the USAPL. That, and then also talk about the
kind of decline in the Pro Series when it comes to like payouts, and that becoming a less attractive option for a lot of people who can compete within the Pro Series. But that's not really the topic of this video, so I'll save that for another one. And I think that's all I have to say for this one.